Welcome to Twinview Talks, a podcast that delves into the crucial digital revolution of the AECO industry. And I'm delighted to welcome today's guest, Rene van Zwijndrecht, a BIM and information management lead at Radcliffes Construction Consultants, who believe that every project, whether new or existing, needs a digital strategy to set the foundations of a building's full life cycle. Welcome, Rene. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for inviting me, Neil.
Our pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure to have with you today. It's just for the benefit of everyone. Would you be able to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and just some of the interesting things you guys are working on at Radcliffes?
Yeah, so I studied architecture in South Africa. Very early on, worked in 3D platforms like Studio Max and Revit in the early days. Came over to the UK a few years ago, 12 years now. Was introduced to the concept of BIM. Being an architect, I started getting a little bit disillusioned with some of the methodologies and processes and the waste in what we do in the industry. So BIM felt like a right move in the right direction. So I moved over to the dark side of BIM. Started off in actually an interior company, trying to help them implement BIM, and then worked with a few different architecture firms. Also worked in a modular factory company, so got introduced to manufacturing approaches and just agile methodologies, which ties very much into BIM. And now leading the business line in Radcliffes, Radcliffes Digital, which helps Radcliffes current clients with their portfolios to set up BIM. But we also expanded our business line and services to helping operational teams. And we've got a few interesting projects. We've got Research Campus that we've been working on, which started off with a few office buildings. It's got a quarry, underwater components and elements that would be moved across the world, which we're looking in incorporating into a digital twin. We've got a resort, an interesting resort coming up with, a massive possibility for setting that up in a digital environment, and the amount of information connected to that. Involved now with one of a few prominent projects in the Middle East, helping a company implement BIM for interior design, funny enough, as well. And then we've been looking at how we could enhance building safety, especially with the Building Safety Act, which really, for me, is the accumulation of what BIM has been trying to do, make sure our information is properly structured, make sure it's available, functional. I think we've been really good at using BIM during construction for for its purpose of coordinating designs. But what happens really to that building? How are we going to run those buildings without it? And there's a few gaps in that. So I'm spending a lot of time on that specific service line. With Radcliffes as a project manager background, we believe that adding information management part of it obviously creates the structure of that information, but how do you manage that as a project just to set that up? So I think that's where we bring a different angle to that service. Yeah.
Amazing. You mentioned there, about the Building Safety Act, and kind of all aware of this concept of the golden thread of information, and something I know you're very aware of and something you focus quite a lot on. But to me, when I try and delve into the golden thread information, it feels relatively vague. It feels like there's elements of it where, how do you actually deliver upon the requirements, and how's the golden thread help you address the compliance issue, the building safeties? Like, in your opinion, how you guys do things at Radcliffe, what's your take on the kind of nuance that's potentially missing from things like the golden thread?
I think there's, it's vague. There is no concrete example of what the golden thread is. It's trying to say you need to be able to trace back to decisions or information connected to those decisions, and that's fairly easy. That's just sorting your information out. It's when that information becomes live and functional information where it could get tricky. How do you over a 50-year lifespan, you know, find the right information? How you trace it back? Yes, there is software platforms that propose solutions, but if that software solution is gone, what do you do? So there needs to be. So for us, it's really starting right from the beginning. So every project we get involved with, it's a bit of a puzzle. You would look at the structure of that project or that building or the infrastructure or the campus even, and you start putting a zoning strategy. So we build a typical information strategy that's got flexibility. So you can put things in, you can take things out. It doesn't break the structure. So it really starts with that. I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think what I've seen with the BSA, there's been a reaction, and mostly the safety reports is a stack of information that's been put together. It's probably the most relevant information currently, and it will fulfill the need for submitting that report to the regulator. However, I don't think there's been a thought to how do you maintain that. So a lot of what we offer as a service is that continuous maintenance. So we would go into existing clients' information, run an audit, and that can be very easily done with a platform. If we've got the structure behind it, you can easily pick up if there's gaps. Because let's face it, it depends on human input ultimately. And things could go missing, but if you keep tabs on it, simple things like, even if you have a digital twin, if you have a massive change to a building, so a wall is removed or extension, it's not, the digital twin's not going to change automatically. You need to action that project of replacing those drawings, if it's basically drawings or the 3D photos or the model. But if you don't build that strategy in for the long term, it's going to rely on someone who might not understand that, and then your chains start breaking. So in short, I think there's been a focus on getting the information. I'm not sure it's been structured for future use, and I think the next part of this Building Safety Act is really starting to be prepared, so it could, by the press of a button, you have even if you don't have the availability of all the information, you have a dashboard that could tell you what's available, what might be in progress. There might be parts of the building that is being decommissioned or items that are being replaced, but you need to have a very quick overview of that so that you could respond to the building regulator. So,
and for those who particularly existing buildings, but even new buildings, that are concerned over the source of data and where the data is and where data is held. Like you talked about data audit. How easy is that for somebody to start that process of I need to find out where my gaps are, to at least before you talk about maintaining it, getting it structured correctly in the first place?
I mean, for us, it started off, we've got quite a comprehensive basic checklist. There's platforms that we've worked with. We're quite agnostic about platforms because, again, we work with different types of clients. So it might be we try and keep an open mind, and we put there's no one platform that does everything, and that's fine. Everything has a good function. So it starts with a good checklist. Now there's experts, building control experts that will have their checklist. But again, I've seen 10 different versions of, of what they think they need. So again, until there's a standard and maybe the regulator release something like that, the regulator is expecting us to do our jobs as professionals in the industry, come up with the best solutions. So start off with a simple tick box.
Yep.
And then you'll start seeing, we've got clients where we said, okay, just do you know who has this information? Do you have this information? Simple. And then all of a sudden it just opens this Pandora's box of, okay, wait a minute, I don't even know where this information is or who's maintaining it. And then you start unraveling it. But then as simple as just a set of folders for the specific information, that's the start. Now there's platforms that you can do a search, which can read PDFs and start looking for keywords. Again, old information will have the weird different naming. So the next step for us is then to take that, start categorizing and organizing it. And then you can start doing much more with it. Yeah.
And then once people have got their data into a place and they're aware of what they've got, and you talk about, you've done the exercise, which is wonderful, but actually the idea behind building safety, the idea behind the golden thread is that it's ongoing. It's a thread throughout the entire lifespan of that building. And how best to go about maintaining that approach in your eyes?
So it's, the simplest is folders, if you've got folders in a structure and where information is, what information, so you have a list of all of the information that should be available. But that then relies on people who take a lot of ownership on that information. Now, building, what I've learned quite recently is the operation side is very fluid. People, new people join, new platforms come on board. So there's constant changes in there. It's never, over a 50-year period. So relying on that star player to keep things intact it's not realistic. So again, if you have an information structure that can be passed on to anybody, that's very easily understood, that's a good start. But then if you start linking it to virtual objects, the building is there. Now you can obviously go physical, you can have a tag there and you scan it and it gives you something. But really, if you funnel it through a lens of a virtual object, so everything goes through that. So if I want to change something, I have to do it through the virtual dashboard. So, and then continue and then come back and say, okay, it's been done. For me, that's the most logical way. Otherwise, it's someone walking around with a color sticker and a photo, and it's filed in a digital folder or a filing cabinet. So for me, that logic, yeah, sorry. So for me, it's object based.
And I guess the beauty of that, the digitalization element of the golden thread is you can put layers of approval in there as well. So if you look at Grenfell as obviously the main most well-known example of changes happening that people weren't aware of, if you changed a fire door that had a less a lower fireproof timing, that could be flagged and alerted that the decision has been made. Is it something that needs to be approved?
And let's face it, even if it's not into a granular level of the certificate's been uploaded, but an action's been triggered, if someone who's responsible for that building can monthly have a extract to say, oh, these action happened in my building. Wait a minute, there's 10 things I might have to check on that if it's compliant. At least you have that, rather than years down the line, like, oh, wait a minute, don't have this.
And then let's kind of talk about the potential future. So, do you see a time when this type of information should be made available to emergency services, for example, so they have access to the digital record, not of the entire building necessarily, but of key, for fire services, key fire particular elements within that building.
Absolutely. I mean, the typical box that they can access with the latest floor plan printed or laminated. I mean, again, how relevant. So imagine they have there's a way to scan that box, and it pops up with the latest information that's linked to this platform, and off you go. uh, um, it should have contact numbers potentially even of who you need to contact if something is not clear. And why a physical? Fine, it's great, but surely they can walk around with an iPad and quickly just scan and proof. So yeah,
Even on the way to the incident, they could do it as they're driving there, but rather than even having to get there and get the black box itself.
Yeah.
And then I guess the other side of this, of course, is residents themselves. So the real tragedy of Grenfell was that people lost their lives. And I guess the digitalization element is that you can pull the two together into one conversation. You can have, yes, the digital replica of the building and the golden thread information, but you can also have the tenant voice, I guess, or the resident voice, and join those two things up.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I spoke to someone who works with a lot of social housing, and there's the other aspect is some people aren't that digital savvy, so people won't open an email or a user app. Potentially they might need to post underneath the door. I think that will kind of phase out over time, but you still need, in those kind of aspects you need it. But you're right, certain information should be available based on the Building Safety Act anyway. And yes, at the moment it might be a physical laminated thing again, but still I think digital way is the way to go. And like you said, someone could put a quick alert saying, hey, someone's left something, or the fire door open, or and there could be a reaction to it.
Amazing. And I guess just to kind of wrap up then, what for people who are listening, what would be your one advice for someone to do tomorrow? What's the if they're considering or thinking, how exactly do we develop our golden thread? How do we make sure we're definitely compliant with the BSA? Like what's that first stepping stone that they can go away and start looking at tomorrow?
So I think there's it's a little bit, so I think BIM and digitalization of buildings is really accessible for all. I think doesn't have to be expensive. It starts with simple as a schedule to start just capturing what information you have, and then you can start working and refining and structuring it. You can create a digital twin in a very simple way. It doesn't have to be a massive, complicated 3D model with all the nuts and bolts. You could literally start with the 3D photos, which we've done 2D CAD. It's ultimately objects, doesn't have to be a physical or 3D object. It could be a data object, and from there you have the ability. You could start with spaces. So I think it's accessible for all, and I think the next really, when we approach clients, it's really, let's just start looking at what you've got. If you know that, then you can start putting a digital platform or ability together to start working with that. And then you can say, I click on this apartment. Okay, there's a Excel schedule that's got a list of what's in there. Simple as that,
Amazing. Thank you very much for your time, Rene. It's been a pleasure speaking.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Neil.